Hello there, Parth Sharma this side, bringing you chess classics in which I'm covering top 15 games played by Vishwanathan Anand. If you're new to this channel, then don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel. If you're already subscribed, then do press the bell icon for future notifications. And if you like my work, then do consider supporting me on Patreon and PayPal. You will find the links in the description. Along with that, you will also find the PGN of this game that I would be covering in the video. So happy days, isn't it? So the game I would be covering here at number 5 spot of top 15 games played by Vishwanathan Anand is his game against Boris Gelfand from 2012 World Chess Championship match. A crucial game not only for Anand in the championship but also Anand as a person as well, because before this game, in game 7, he was totally dominated by Gelfand, and he was, I would say, crushed by Gelfand in game 7. Gelfand gave him no sniff throughout the tournament in the first 7 games, and Gelfand won that 7th game quite comprehensively, where his knights were totally dominating Anand's king. So it was doubly important for Anand to not only equalize the score but at least get some chance to, let's say, make a comeback, because after game 7 there would be only 5 games left, and 5 games isn't enough for to make a comeback, especially in World Chess Championship games. So it was a desperate game, and there goes the story that he didn't sleep that night. He was looking very down, demotivated, and he didn't know how he would be able to stage a comeback, because Gelfand wasn't giving him anything away. He was playing very solidly. He was playing 1d4, and he was playing Sveshnikov as black, or Grunfeld for that instance. So it was very difficult for Anand to get a breakthrough. So this game signifies another thing very special. It turned out to be the shortest decisive game ever in World Chess Championship history, and we will see how many moves did it last. So without further ado, Anand is white, Gelfand is black. Game 8 of 2012 World Chess Championship match. There we go. Anand opens with d4, knight f6, c4, g6. Early indications. He hasn't played King's Indian in the championship in the match. So early indication that he is again going to play Grunfeld. Right after, if white plays knight c3, then black plays d5. So he knows that. And if he plays Grunfeld, the game would again be solid, although Grunfeld is a tactical opening, but still it would be very solid. Gelfand will still be able to hold it. So he goes for this f3, the anti-Grunfeld structure. And in previous games, Gelfand played pawn to d5 in response to f3. Again, he wanted to transform it into Grunfeld. But here, in game 8, Gelfand played pawn to c5, so bit of a Benoni type of structure, and I've already mentioned that it's Benoni. It comes from Hebrew word Benoni. Forgot the meaning right now, but it's not related to that South African place Benoni. So this is c5, and white's typical response to it is d5, and black's typical response to it is d6. And this position can also arise from English opening as well. Since these pawns are fixed, there is no chance for this bishop to develop through this diagonal at all. So it's prudent to keep this bishop on g7, not only to develop this bishop but also to provide it with a good long diagonal where it would be looking at the corner of his eye at this rook on a1. But Anand continues with his development, pawn to e4 and bishop to g7. There we go. Now this knight, as you can see, if it comes to h3, then bishop swipes off that knight, and once pawn recaptures, then the pawn structure is somewhat ruined because this king is somewhat getting opened by the advance of c pawn, d pawn and e pawn, which means that this king won't like to go in this direction, but would rather like to go in this direction. So hence playing knight h3 would result in bishop swiping off here, and after pawn captures ruining the pawn structure, and castling kingside would become pretty much impossible in that case. So he takes a brave decision. He plays knight to e2. Gelfand castles, and now another key decision in this position. Normally, if this knight moves away, let's say it goes here, well, ideal move is to play knight f to d7, because then this knight would rather like to come on a6, because this pawn is somewhat blocking this bishop's route to a6. Although this knight can move, but what about this pawn? How will this move? And that's the point. That's the main case, that knight f to d7, this knight to d7 might be a better point, which would mean that this bishop can open up to this long diagonal, and which would again mean that development of this bishop would somewhat be restricted. And if this knight comes here, then there would be another weakness, that would be on c3, because then queen a5 would directly point to that weakness on c3. So understandably, Anand plays this knight to c3. This was an essential move in this position. Looks pretty odd because normally an appropriate developing move for this knight is to come to c3, but this is already being taken by the knight on g1, which came to c3 via e2 and c3. So which means that this knight has to reroute itself and would find another spot, let's say to a3 and c2, to get itself functioning. As I said, again, very difficult decision, but at the end of the day, or I should say, if this game would have ended in any result, that would still have been a wise decision. Now here, black can play two moves. First is to play e6 to get rid of the center pawn and to establish not only queen's route here to a potential h4, but also to give this bishop a good square on e6. And if this recaptures, then this would open the line for bishop coming here to f5, and the position will be pretty much suitable. The second option would be is to play knight f to d7 and opening the line of this bishop and try to create more pressure by playing queen to a5 and putting this knight into the spin. Might be a good choice. But here Gelfand goes for something unusual. He plays knight to h5. Now, as you can see, this knight has blocked this bishop's path, which means that this bishop is free to move, and now this bishop cannot go to b2 because the knight is there on c3. And if the bishop takes this knight, then white would gleefully capture that knight with his b1 knight. Also, while playing knight to h5, as you can see, black hasn't played e6, which means that to stop e6, you have to get some move or get a move, and appropriately so, Anand takes the advantage of that and plays bishop to g5, pinning this pawn, which means that e6 is not possible because the queen will be on breeze. And now this bishop is not eyeing on this b2 square because this knight is on the way. Bishop g5 makes an appropriate move, again a superb move. Now black can play here e6, but then bishop jumps back to e3 and position would still be fine. But while playing f6, the problem would lie that if white manages to play pawn to g4, then this knight would suddenly be running very low on squares, because then f6 square is being taken away from the knight by the pawn. So here Gelfand thought about this. If he plays f6, then this knight after g4 would somewhat be trapped. So he plays bishop to f6, Now getting rid of this bishop, now I assume that Anand would be delighted getting rid of this bishop, and he takes it, pawn takes, now comes queen to d2. Well, ideal move would have been for Anand to play just pawn to g4 and to keep attacking this knight, but then this knight will tuck back to g7 and that position will be fine. Meanwhile, as you can see, there is a weakness on this f6 square, and this is somewhat restricting the queen's route to h4. So Gelfand appropriately so plays pawn to f5. Anand takes the pawn, and now bishop takes f5. Now looks like it's walking in the fork. g4, and here Gelfand comes up with a little bit of inaccuracy, and Anand had something up his sleeve while going into this line. The best move here should have been to play queen to h4, check, king to d1, and by the way, I should say that g4 doesn't win a piece, as you can see, because there is this move that black can play. Bishop takes b1, rook takes b1. Once knight goes to g7, I think the position would still be fine. White would play king to c2 and the position would hold and eventually fizzle out to a draw. Instead, after g4, Gelfand goes for this check, and as usual, king d1 is played, and now he takes the bishop, rook takes, and simple move is to just retreat the knight back on f6 and position would still be fine. And I don't see any difficulties for black to get rid of this position. Yes, white would definitely be better because of the underdevelopment of the queen side. White certainly does have the initiative, and also this push on the king side, this raging push on the king side. Bishop d3 is in the air, so much pressure that would be exerted at the black's king side, that would be tremendous. However, in this position, Gelfand comes up with this idea, which was a humongous blunder, because you won game 7, you are up a point, and you come up with this queen to f6, and this turns out to be a fatal blunder. Gelfand thought that Anand would play king to c2. And why Anand would play king to c2? Because there is this threat of fork and winning the rook in the corner. So king c2 comes out of that, and he thought that after knight to f4, knight to e4, he planned this exchange sacrifice, and he has this compensation in the form of knight to d7, knight d7 coming to e5, because there is no dark square bishop, which means there is no dark square opponent for black to challenge. And if he manages to play these 4 pawns on the dark squares, then black would be absolutely successful, and I think black would have seen its worst out and would be coming on top. But here Anand had planned something. I would give you some time, take a pause and think what Anand played in this position. Well, if you found it out, that's awesome. And if you just want to enjoy the show, Anand took the knight on h5. Ooh, very daring move indeed, with a point down. And you had a sleepless night before this game, and you're giving up a rook in the corner. Gelfand plays queen takes f3 check, king c2. He is actually exchanged up in this position. What have you done, Anand? Oh my god. But to Gelfand's surprise, there is this beautiful move that Anand had planned. He saw this when Gelfand played rook e8 check, and this was very interesting. Again, I would give you some time, take a pause and think what Anand played in this position. Looks to me it's very obvious that you have found out the move. Well, if you play queen to f4, looks like a very obvious move. Then this queen comes out by playing queen to g1, and Anand played queen to f2, and now this poor queen on h1 is trapped. Anand just played queen to f2 and he walked off. He was standing outside waiting for Gelfand to resign, and once Gelfand puts his hand out, Anand rushed to the board and shook his hand, which meant that Gelfand has resigned the game. What a superb game this is. This poor chap is trapped. You see, this is covered, 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 this is covered. All the queens that queen can go are trapped, are basically covered. And now white threatens to play bishop to h3 or bishop to d3, and this rook will gobble up this queen in the corner. And it looks like a premature resignation, but this is absolutely lost. If black tries to play knight to a6, then white would simply play bishop to e2, and the queen is trapped, the queen is gone. Knight to b4 check might be a possible try, but I'm afraid to no avail. After king d2, there are no checks from this knight. This rook will gobble up the queen. And there's a funny thing. It looked like that knight c6 actually saves the queen. And Gelfand might not have seen this, because if you now try to play and try to move bishop to e2, let's say, winning the queen like that, but there is this beautiful knight d4 check which saves. And after king d3, rook takes e2 is a killer blow to white. It's totally gone. And if you see that bishop is going, then after, let's say, what happens if white plays bishop to d3? Well, then comes this another saving move, queen to f3. Beautiful saving move. It's like a decoy, I would say, a poisoned queen, because if queen takes queen, knight d4 check gets the piece back, and white is an exchange up, or I should say black is an exchange up. Totally winning position. However, after knight c6, white can simply take that knight on c6, and after queen takes c6, bishop to d3, if black takes, then rook g1 check wins. So rook e5, and now rook f1, threatening queen takes f7, and then h6. And after queen c7, knight d5 is a killer blow, threatening the queen and threatening knight f6. This knight is well worth a rook. There is no one who can, no piece who can dislodge this knight from d5. A superb piece in the position. And let's say after queen c7, instead of queen c7, let's say if you play f5, well, then pawn takes, and rook g1 is totally winning. No hopes whatsoever for black in this position. It's totally gone. As it turned out, after queen f2 at move 17, Boris Gelfand resigned the game, and it turned out to be shortest decisive game. So this game actually propelled Anand to get his self-confidence back. Although against Magnus he didn't recover it, but as it turned out, this game was probably one of the most important games that he would have played in his life, because it was a world championship game, everything at stake, point down, very little room to make a comeback, and boy didn't he make a comeback in style. At the end, he managed to win, or I should say retain, his World Chess Championship title by beating Gelfand in tie breaks in a very complicated endgame. In game 2, where Gelfand was running very long time and he blundered at the end, it turned out to be win. I will give it that lesson some other time. If you blunder in Philedo's position, it becomes a Lucena position, and that's what happened in that tie-break game which Anand won. So that would be for some other time. This time I think I beg your pardon, I hope you liked the video. I hope you liked my analysis. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Cheers. Bye.